Hey there. Ritual here to give a big shout out to you for making it through the hectic holiday season. The magic of those family moments, that was you. And now there's new milestones to prep for in 2025. This new year, check clean, quality pregnancy nutrient support off your to-do list with Ritual. We've done the research to create science-backed pregnancy support like our prenatal multivitamin, natal choline, and fertility support, all designed to be taken alongside each other. But don't just take our word for it. They're also third-party tested for microbes and heavy metals and Clean Label Project certified. So whether you're trying, thinking about trying, or already there, we don't have to tell you that prioritizing yourself can be the hardest part. That's why we're helping you get started today with 30% off a 3-month supply for a limited time at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Aleister Crowley, the self-proclaimed Great Beast 666, a wizard, a lunatic, or maybe history's most unhinged trust fund kid. He was a poet, a mountaineer, an occultist, and an absolute menace to polite society. People called him the wickedest man in the world. No small feat, considering Jack the Ripper was still fresh in the collective nightmare. Crowley didn't just flirt with the occult. He took it out to dinner, bought it drinks, and convinced it to move in. He dabbled in sex magic, which is just as chaotic as it sounds, tried summoning ancient gods, and may or may not have triggered a few apocalyptic vibes along the way. His fingerprints are all over modern mysticism, rock and roll, and at least a handful of conspiracy theories. The Beatles put him on Sgt. Pepper's. Jimmy Page bought his haunted mansion. And the CIA? Well, some folks think they kept an eye on him for entirely different reasons. So who was Crowley, really? A misunderstood genius, a con artist with a flair for the dramatic, or a British spy who got a little too into his own act? We're cracking open the book of Crowley. Expect rituals, scandals, and an absolutely irresponsible amount of drugs. Okay, here's the thing about Aleister Crowley. Depending on who you ask, he's either a very misunderstood genius or the living embodiment of this guy again. And by the way, during the course of this episode, I may call him Crowley, I may call him Crowley. I think either one is correct. Whichever one you believe it should be, just pretend that's the one that I'm saying. Okay, so some hail him as the father of modern mysticism, a revolutionary who cracked open the cosmic secrets of the universe and rewrote the rules of spirituality. Others say he was a drugged-out narcissist who threw together just enough Latin, ancient symbols, and scandal to convince people he was something more than a rich kid with a flair for the dramatic. But love him or loathe him, you cannot deny his impact. Crowley wasn't just some weirdo lighting candles in a dark basement. His ideas laid the foundation for the modern occult movements. Wicca, influenced by him. Chaos magic, heavily inspired. Every goth kid in the 90s with a deck of tarot cards, they probably quoted him at some point. And then there's his reach into pop culture. The man was an occult Easter egg scattered across music, books, and conspiracy theories. Jimmy Page was obsessed with him. David Bowie name-dropped him. And if you've ever heard the theory that the government is run by secret societies using dark magic to manipulate reality, yeah, Crowley's name pops up in those circles too. But here's the real question. Was Crowley truly a man of mystery and magic, or just the most committed method actor of all time? Was he tapping into something real, or just really good at getting people to buy into the bit? Let's find out. And we'll start with the magical practices. Once inside the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Crowley wasted no time in doing what he did best, causing chaos. While the other members were busy summoning spirits and arguing about the correct way to hold a wand, it's Leviosa. By the way, they really were trying to correct each other. Crowley was out here experimenting with hardcore rituals, consuming every drug within reach, and trying to climb the ranks faster than a guy speedrunning in a video game. The problem? Most of the Golden Dawn's higher-ups hated him. They saw Crowley as a brash, power-hungry upstart who didn't respect the rules. Spot on, actually. He, in turn, thought they were weak old men pretending to be powerful sorcerers. I think they both got points. It got so messy that the actual famous poet and playwright, W.B. Yeats, ended up helping to block Crowley from advancing within the order. And imagine beefing so hard with a guy that a future Nobel Prize-winning poet has to personally tell you to sit down and shut up. But Crowley wasn't about to let a bunch of robe-wearing bureaucrats hold him back. If they didn't want to hand over the keys to the Magick Kingdom, fine. He'd build his own. And so, in 1904, while traveling through Egypt, because of course he was in Egypt, Crowley had a vision. Or more accurately, he claimed that a supernatural entity named Iowas dictated to him a book. The Book of the Law. This book became the foundation of his new spiritual philosophy, Thelema, which is basically, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Now, at first glance, it sounds like an ancient way of saying, you do you, but Crowley meant something much deeper. He believed that every person had a divine purpose, a true will, and that enlightenment came from discovering and following it, no matter what society thought. To help achieve this higher state, Crowley devised his own brand of magic, with an extra K at the end, because normal magic is for illusionists and birthday parties, while magic, with a K, is for serious practitioners. It also helped him separate his rituals from, pulling a rabbit out of his hat. Crowley's magic was a mix of rituals, drugs, and whatever else he could justify as spiritual enlightenment. His ritual magic involved elaborate ceremonies where he'd chant in ancient languages, hoping to summon spirits and manipulate reality, usually while wearing something ridiculous. Then there was sex magic, where he believed harnessing sexual energy could lead to mystical power. The specifics? Let's just say a lot of body fluids were involved, and he wrote entire manuals on the subject that are still referenced today. And of course, drugs. All of the drugs. Crowley wasn't just dabbling. He was conducting full-scale chemical warfare on his own consciousness in pursuit of enlightenment. And because subtlety was not in his vocabulary, he declared the Book of the Law as humanity's new spiritual law and dared the world to keep up. But for all of his talk about divine purpose, what he really wanted was power, influence, and a following. And he knew exactly how to get it, by making himself a walking scandal. The British press could not get enough of him. He called himself the Great Beast 666, lived like a Victorian rock star with no regard for PR, and made sure his name stayed in the headlines, whether it was through rumors of human sacrifice, which he heavily implied but never proved, his sex and drug-fueled commune in Sicily, which got him exiled, or his deliberate mockery of Christianity, which just added to his villain persona. Even fellow occultists found him exhausting. Then there was the money problem. Crowley burned through his inheritance early and spent the rest of his life mooching off wealthy followers, writing sensationalist occult books, or just straight up begging. At one point, he was so broke he put out an ad offering his services as a professional occult consultant, which is maybe just a fancy way of saying a freelance wizard for hire. Crowley wanted the world to see him as a dark prophet. What he got instead was a reputation that was part mystic, part menace, and part absolute mess. But even as his own personal life became a mess of lawsuits, drugs, and ex-followers running for the hills, Crowley never stopped believing in his own mythos. He was convinced he was changing the world. The problem? The world didn't seem all that interested in changing with him. And the backlash grew. The consequences of his reckless life choices started catching up. By the 1930s, Aleister Crowley had gone from the wickedest man in the world to a broke, exiled addict scraping by on the fumes of his own reputation. Countries wanted nothing to do with him. His followers were dwindling, and even his other occultists were starting to act like they never RSVP'd to his weird rituals. His once massive inheritance was long gone. burned through on drugs, failed communes, and whatever else he could justify as spiritual research. His health collapsed right alongside his finances. The man who once claimed to command supernatural forces was now just another heroin addict, too sick and too strung out to summon much of anything. In a last-ditch effort to matter, he tried convincing British intelligence that he could help fight World War II using the occult. MI6 let him hang around for a bit, possibly as a joke, but no one was putting a guy that much of a train wreck and that high in charge of national security. Surely. On December 1st, 1947, Crowley died in a boarding house, broke, sick, and mostly forgotten. His final words, "I am perplexed." Which for a man who spent his entire life claiming to have all the answers is about as ironic as it gets. But Crowley's story wasn't over. If anything, death only made the legend stronger. For a guy who died broke and disgraced, Aleister Crowley somehow became more famous after death than he ever was in life. His teachings, once dismissed as the ramblings of an opium-fueled megalomaniac, found new life in the 20th century's counterculture movements. The chaos he preached, it finally had an audience ready to listen. His ideas laid the groundwork for modern occultism. Wicca borrowed heavily from his rituals. Chaos magicians saw him as an innovator. And Thelema, his self-made religion, still has followers today. And then there's the rock and roll. Crowley's name has practically been embedded in its DNA. The Beatles put his face on Sgt. Pepper's. David Bowie name-dropped him, and Jimmy Page went all in, buying Crowley's old house, because, of course, that's something a weird rock star would do. Conspiracy theorists couldn't let him go either. Some claim Crowley was a secret agent. Others say he accidentally summoned dark forces that shaped history. And then there's the truly wild theory that he fathered Barbara Bush, making George W. Bush his grandson. Is this true? No, but it's absolutely funny. Crowley wanted to be a prophet. Instead, he became something even more powerful, an idea, a symbol of rebellion, mysticism, and excess. And whether you see him as a genius or a deeply committed lunatic, one thing is certain. He made sure that no one would ever forget his name. Aleister Crowley wanted to be a prophet, a magician, a man who bent the universe to his will. Instead, he became something stranger, an idea that refused to die. Whether he was a genius, a fraud, or the most dedicated eccentric of his era, his influence is everywhere. His magic may be real, maybe just a long-winded excuse to do whatever he wanted, but his legacy, that part worked. The world hasn't stopped talking about him since. Thanks for listening to this episode of 10 Minute Mystery. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit subscribe now. Leave a review because it helps other curious minds find the show. And if you're craving more stories but with a darker twist, check out my other podcast, 10 Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. See you next time.